Hello, 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 hello. Hey, how's it going? I think we're live now. We're
Okay, Eric.
broadcasting.
Eric, what were you saying
broadcasting
20 minutes ago?
What's that?
Eric, what were you saying 20 minutes ago?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to recapture that lightning in the bottle moment that Jason wants me to replicate somehow. Let me say. Okay, so I was asking Tim before you had walked into backstage if Klaus has any sort of experience in the history of as mainstream comics goes, was there ever phases in which suddenly creator-owned comics became the thing to talk about? And does it happen in cycles or phases?
What do you think, Tim?
I'm not aware of anything even close to the scope of what people are talking about now.
Really?
Yeah.
Even oh gosh, what was that studio's name that Neil Adams opened up a little while ago? Was it Continuity?
Yeah. No, that was as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was a Neil only thing.
But there was never sort of a comic book collective kind of situation in which.
I don't think so.
Hey, everybody.
Klaus, what do you think?
No,
Yeah,
I think
classic
that's
color.
true. Although I'm not sure, Eric, what you mean by collective. Do you mean like sort of like a guild or?
Well, something similar to today, right? There's been a really, in my opinion, a really sort of feasible and, depending on the individual, positive movement in doing your creator-owned books without being bound to the infrastructure of a pre-existing comic book setup, right? In the past, I suspect there was something similar to that, but probably different restrictions and different challenges. Yeah.
I mean, you could point to say. I mean, I'm just riffing here. I think that's an interesting question to ask. But there were people obviously like Will Eisner, right, who owned his own stuff, and Gil Kane tried to do it with His Name Is Savage, back in the 70s, I guess it was. But they were, nothing. I think Tim is right that nothing comparable to what's going on now when, creator owned is truly a viable. And then, the caveat is, I was talking to somebody the other day who was trying to get a creator owned project off the ground. And the problem with them was that they had no social media profile. So they seem to, go, if you're going to crowdfund, you've got to have people following you. So the creator-owned stuff definitely seems to be attached to your ability to have a following in social media.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Hey, Cully.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yep.
How are you, man?
I'm doing good. How about you guys?
Good. You've got that really. You have the appropriate amount of rasp in your voice.
I try.
It works for you.
It's
very,
Saturday. You understand?
Well, it's very engaging.
On weekdays, I sound like a girl.
Now.
Nothing wrong with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
I was going to say.
Anyway, how you fellas doing?
There it is. He's a New York. He's a New York taxi cab driver from the '60s.
Right. I'm Frank.
What were you saying, Tim? I cut you off.
I can't remember.
Oh
Too
boy,
long ago.
it was all of a minute and a half ago. I think you were about to.
I was welcoming Cully because it seems kind of appropriate for all the success that he's had or been adjacent to, at least. With Red and,
I'm frequently adjacent to success.
I mean,
Frequently
I don't
adjacent.
know how much of Red, for instance,
Right.
you see or control, and how much of that is just Mark.
Well, I mean, they can't do anything without me, obviously. That's I own half of it. So
You do? Okay. Well, I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
even sure about that. So
yeah,
I know your names on the books, but
yeah. I mean, it's a 50-50 thing between Warren and I. I mean, I don't know how. I'm starting to realize that very often maybe the artist isn't a 50% owner of a property.
How do you mean, Cully?
Well, I mean, I hear stories from other artists all the time about, well, I'm doing this creator-owned book with this writer, and I'm getting
Oh,
this much, and I'm like, why are you not getting 50? Because
right.
I don't know that I would accept a deal that wasn't 50-50 with anyone.
Sure.
I mean,
yeah.
to me, it's like the art is that's half the gig.
Yeah, for sure.
At least.
Yeah, at least, right.
Listen to you guys. Listen to you biased motherfuckers. Anyway, get back to
Visual media, man. Come on.
I get it. I'm in your corner. I'm massaging your shoulders. I'm ready to send you back into the ring. So you're saying that, do you think, Cully, to your point, which is when you hear about these, would you say that they're younger or less experienced, less knowledgeable?
Not always. That's the thing.
Okay.
Sometimes I talk to
That's
people who are
surprising.
closer to my own age, and they get in these situations where they have little to no rights. And I'm like, how on earth would an experienced person like you not protect yourself or talk to a lawyer, for Christ's sake?
Do you have maybe ongoing theories about that? Why they would take such a a deal that was like?
I don't know. I honestly sometimes think that artists, I hate to say it, but tend to be very passive and don't sort of look out for themselves.
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
Who's rattling around coins in a can in the background?
that'd be Jason probably.
We're crying out loud, Jay.
There's a thunderstorm coming in. I'll try to mute myself.
That's actually Jason's bones.
That's me.
He's just
Getting older.
rattling around in a can. I'm sorry, Cully. The distraction cut you off. You're saying you don't know why they would take that deal? You don't know why?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It depends on the individual, I think. But I think a lot of artists have a tendency to just kind of like, they want to kind of just be in their hole and they want to draw like we all do. And I think that, they just sort of go along to get along. And then before they know it, they wake up and go, wait a minute, I'm not getting what I'm supposed to get. And it becomes this whole passive aggressive thing. And, I always say to people, it's like, look, contracts save friendships. And it may seem like a pain in the ass at the beginning, and it may be fraught or whatever, but you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache if you work that deal at the very beginning, so that everybody knows what everybody gets.
Yeah. I'll say this, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, Klaus, because you're teaching classes at a respectable institution. I think artists are often, in any sort of course that they take, it heavily favors craft, but rarely includes like any sort of business training.
Agreed.
Right. So when they get into a situation similar to what Cully's talking about, they see the opportunity to get good or to get sort of get the opportunity to be able to draw that book and participate in something that has potentially be a successful thing. But if somebody were to ask them, hey, what does this mean that we're going to be using all of your artwork and putting it on advertising, T-shirts, underwear, what have you?
Right.
They don't know how to ask for whatever's the relative worth of that, And that kind of puts them at creatives in general, but artists in specific, I can speak for myself, that I didn't have any idea of what that was, or how to ask for that. So to Cully's point, I think it's well worth getting in, bringing on some kind of legal advice, some kind of legal component into your deal making. Does your school offer anything like that at all, Klaus? The business side of
We started offering that very recently in the last, I would say, 2 years, maybe 3 at the most. But we are starting to offer that as independent classes. I do try to give in my class at least once per semester a class that's just on business and contracts and the different categories that you fall into after you leave high school. You can be under contract, you can be a freelancer, you can be incorporated. What do you expect to pay in taxes? what's a reasonable page rate, all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I think it's not incorrect to say that the landscape, it has just changed so much that unless you factor in, crowdfunding and Patreon and other way, Instagram, and selling your work on social media, you're outdated. You have to factor that in for the kids, because that is their landscape, I think. And anything less than mentioning that or including that would be a disservice to them.
Sure.
I think a lot of the kids, I think a lot of the kids think that they can make a living without ever having to work for a company.
And maybe they can.
Yes, that's right.
And that's some of what we were talking about last week, right?
Yeah. I think, going back to what you're talking about in regards to giving them some kind of tips on business, Klaus, do their eyes immediately glaze over? Can they be less interested in what you're talking about?
That is an interesting observation. I think to some degree that's true. It's hard for them to relate to that level of participation within the medium. I think that's the way I would put it. It's so alien to them. Talking about lawyers or recommending you get a good accountant.
Right.
Hopefully, my hope is that, a year or two or three from now, they'll remember some of that. But yeah, I think the eyes tend to glaze over.
Yeah.
I think some of that's personality based also.
How do you mean?
Because I think, like we were talking about earlier, I think that there are people who take to sort of asking for and demanding what they deserve like a duck to water, and some people don't. Some people are very, they tend to shy away from any kind of talk of business because they just want to do the creative.
Right.
And some people, have to learn that. I mean, I would have put 20-year-old me in the latter category, and
really
52-year-old me is much more in the former category.
When did you pick up on the critical nature of like having an understanding for the importance of the business side, Kelly? Was there sort of like this formative experience?
I think at some point you wake up and go, I'm really tired of being poor.
Being poor sucks for sure.
because when you're a freelancer, I mean, let's be honest, it's like, especially when you're young, the tendency is, the default is to be poor, and you realize you have to start doing something to make yourself a little more money, whether that's working harder or whether that's working smarter, or some of it's luck, obviously. And I think I lucked out with Red, but at the same time, it's like, I have become a lot more willing to say, hey, I'm not getting what I'm supposed to get here, so how about we fix this? And I'm not going to leave you alone until we do.
I wonder what that is now that sort of allows you to confidently flex that muscle, to be able to say, like,
some of it is the crowd, I think. I mean,
go ahead, Tim.
Well, so many more people are doing it, and so young kids are now not necessarily smarter, but maybe smarter than I was, I'm sure.
Maybe more savvy or something. Whatever, however you define it,
And that goes back to the social media and the comfort level with that.
Although I don't think social media makes you smarter, that's for sure.
No, it certainly doesn't. But it makes you more savvy.
It makes you believe that you're smart.
and that's not nothing. I mean, that confidence does factor into things a lot, I think.
Here's what I see with social media, right? And as far as the subject matter that we're talking about, people understand that they are supposed to be able to ask for more. They understand the general nature of that. But what it doesn't prepare you for, or the tools that it doesn't give you, is what to ask for and how to ask for it.
Right.
It just knows that you're supposed to get more. But because of
That's
that,
a really interesting observation.
it somehow just gets out there that you deserve more without having to put the effort into it, you know? Like, you're always going to be on the other side of a bargaining chess table when you're dealing with a company, right? They're always going to try to get away with less, right? And or more, depending on how you look at it, right? They're always going to try to get away with whatever they get away with, right? And as an artist, you know, at least in this day and age, you have an understanding. It's like, wait a second, I think that favors you more than me. And the answer, probably 9 times out of 10, is that yeah, absolutely, it favors the company. What people don't have the mindfulness to do, or at the very least experience to do, is, well, if you disagree with me, tell me the thing that you actually want. And at best, I'll say a good portion of them would just shrug their shoulder and be like, well, I don't know what to ask for, but I just know I deserve more. And at that point, the bargaining table, the other side of the bargaining table, sort of quote unquote wins, right?
What I'm getting from this is that you're saying that there's been an increase in a sense that you should be getting more for what
Yes.
you do.
Yes.
But there's still, that doesn't necessarily correlate to a knowledge of when to pick your battles.
Yeah.
Correct.
Totally.
There's definitely a set of muscles that you need to exercise and able to
A sense
and
of
be able to walk,
proportion.
exactly, and be able to walk into a room and ask for what quote unquote more is for you, right?
Yeah.
There was a couple of times, you know, in dealing with a recent exclusivity deal, I was lucky enough to reach out to the young lady who was all in a room with us when we were all talking about NFTs at one point several months back. And I said, her name is, you know, charmingly enough, Robin Williams. And I said, hey, Robin, can you take a look through this contract that seems to be on the up and up, but just go through it with your IP lawyer brain to see whether or not there's things here that we could optimize moving forward. She took about a day, right? She came back, maybe as many as 2. She came back and she said, Eric, everything in here favors them. Everything in here, especially the time, the delivery, and for however long that they hold on to this property, favors them. Now, do you want me to go in there and, you know, get tough a bit? And I said, oh, absolutely. And as she walked me through the red lines that she was going through with the contract, it dawned on me some of this stuff that they have in these sort of boilerplate contracts it seems pretty decent. It seems pretty above board until you start zooming out and thinking of it in context of, like, you know, reality.
Well, when you start thinking of it in terms of rights, that's when it starts to get a little weird.
Right.
In terms of like upfront terms,
Right.
they seem to be, like you said, they seem to be pretty above board.
Right. But that's how they get you, right?
That's how they
because
get you.
the upfront stuff seems so very lucrative. The upfront stuff seems so very enticing, and that you can't get any sweeter than what they try to offer you upfront, because they know it's the back end stuff that really has a tendency, assuming of course it's successful, it's the back end stuff that really has a tendency to pay off in the end. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Eric, talk about a little bit, you know, just about what back end stuff you're talking about. You know, like residuals, royalties, you know, participation. Well, like what can you specifically say about?
Yeah, it's in all of those, right? So, for instance, it's even something along the lines of how long they hold on to that exclusivity for, right? When you have a brand, well, when you have a relatively unproven platform that's reaching out to you and say, hey, we want to be able to exclusively distribute your stuff in this capacity, they are, and this is the part that you don't think about, right? Especially in a room like this one, who have, I think, just your guys' pedigree elevates the worth of whatever it is that people are approaching you for. You are not, what's the best way to say this without sounding insulting? Like, when they approach you and you guys have this sort of background that each of you guys have in your professional careers, right? They are leveraging your name, not the other way around.
That's true.
Right? But the upfront that they offer you, the dollar amount that they offer you, seems really, really nice. Not if you don't think about the idea that was like, wait a second, based on my name, you are going to go around to all of the major news outlets when you do your press releases. And because you have Tim Sale, because you have Cole Hammer, because you have Klaus Janson, that suddenly elevates your position as a company and as a brand new entity. But there's no dollar figure associated with that in the upfront contract. You see what I mean? You have to actually negotiate for that concept.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right.
And that's just one of many that I've come to that I've run across.
Yeah, I really, for whatever anybody else's experiences with Jeff have been, I really lucked out.
How so, Tim?
Well, both with the way that we creatively work together, but also his mind. He didn't come from comics, right? I mean, he came as a fan, but he came from dealing in a arena of movies and TV where there were agents and that kind of stuff was totally different than the way comics were run. He was a fan of comics. He wanted to do it just like we did.
Sure.
And but as soon as he got into it, he became a pain in the ass to everybody, and everybody hated him. Well, at the companies,
sure,
right?
But that's because he knew better.
Yeah, he said,
Yeah.
we're in the business of selling Superman pajamas and peanut butter.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a similar experience with John Rogers when we were doing Blue Beetle, because he came in as someone who was a screenwriter and a TV producer. And
right.
I think that's one of the reasons why he doesn't do comics anymore, is because from his perspective, the business is really screwed up.
In what sense,
Yeah.
Cully?
In the sense that there's so much money floating around and the creative people have no real right to it or no stake in it.
Yeah.
And also, I think because there's no union and there's no kind of organizing principle, there just seems to be a lot of chaos when you're doing any kind of a book, especially a monthly.
Yes.
Well, the whole idea of having an agent, for instance, is just foreign to the big two, at least.
Yes.
And they resent it. And
Do they really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Now, Mike Friedrich was. Is everybody familiar with Mike Friedrich? No? Yeah. Okay.
I'm not. But go ahead.
Oh,
Tim.
okay. Well, he was a writer for DC primarily in the 70s. He did some Batman work with Neil Adams and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then he created a company called Star Reach, which had its own publications and didn't really go that far or anything, but he was very interested in, if not a union, in creating the kind of things that we're talking about. So a voice to speak for you that was business savvy, who had come from the industry and knew a lot about how the companies worked. And so he had a cadre of like Paul Chadwick and
Oh, okay.
myself and probably about a dozen people at any one time. And but I know that editors at the companies have told me how much they did not like and resented working with an agent. Why should I have to talk to somebody when I can talk to you?
Well, I mean, what's funny is, I mean, Jason, I think, could speak to that, because I mean, I think Jason runs into that with con organizers and people who want to buy original art, and they don't want to deal with a representative. They want to deal directly with the person. And part of that, I think, is because in their mind it's simpler, but part of that is because I think that they know they can get better terms.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
More favorable terms for themselves. And and they, I've had people complain to me about that, and I'm like, so you're complaining to me that you want me to sanction you getting a better deal than I could get with a representative, and why would I do that?
Good for you.
Well, let me just add as an anecdote. I've had the experience that if you approach a company with an agent or allow the agent to approach the company, they won't talk to you. They don't want to hear it.
Are we talking mainstream publishing, or just in what's? Can you talk about specificity?
Mainstream publishing, and I've had the experience that if you approach them or allow the agent to do the work for you, you're dismissed. They don't want to.
Why is that? I wonder. Is it the hassle? Is it the?
I think it's because they want everything and don't want to give the creative people their fair share. I can't help but think that that's the bottom line.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, why else would there be anything?
Right, because I mean,
companies exist to maximize their own advantage. That's
sure.
That's their reason for being. I mean, they're gonna do that. It's their nature.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing, and I'm sure this represents my own naivete. It's astounding to me the inequity or the disproportionate amount of benefits that the company has as compared to the individual creators. It's still at this point, at this late point in my life and my career, I'm astounded at it. It is so unfair.
I know.
Yeah.
It is pretty funny when you're in any kind of a negotiation with like a large company like that's owned by a Disney or a Warner Media or whatever,
right.
And you get the claim of poverty. Like, well, we can't afford. Like, really? Come on now. Come on. And maybe what you want to say is you don't think you'll get a return, and that's fair. But you're still talking. If you're talking about an investment in what a creative person is going to do for you, it's an investment, and
perfectly said.
Maybe you'll get a return, or maybe you won't.
Yes.
But it's a roll of the dice, and it's a roll of the dice for everybody at the table.
I believe that there's this weird divide between that excuse that you're talking about, Cully. We just can't afford, right? And the basic understanding of what you and everybody else in this room has a tendency to build for them, right? The affordability, and I'll use a personal experience, an anecdote of my personal experience, which is somebody asked me to do a cover, and I said, look, I know what that cover is going to do, right? I know that character does not exist before I draw it, right? And so not only am I compounding as far as my charge is concerned, the action of physically drawing that cover, right? The exercise of doing that cover, but also designing it,
right?
Like that character was zero. It didn't exist. You asked me to design it, and now it does. And who knows in what capacity you'll end up using that design moving forward. Now, they had said like, oh, it's rarely going to be used in the book. It's only blah, blah, blah. It's like, yes, but you're not paying me for the X amount of pages that character exists in. You're paying me for the fact that it was nothing. I came in, and based off of the pedigree of my body of work and the things that I've done in the past, you're paying me for that privilege. Right? You can, and the argument could be made that, hey, somebody, I could give this to somebody and they charge half as much, a third of what you're charging. Yes, you can absolutely do that, and there would be no hard feelings. But when you have me do it, this is how much it costs, right?
Yeah.
And I think something is getting lost in these companies' minds where they think that should be compounded into your basic cover rate when it didn't exist previously. So if you're drawing a brand new series, and I think this may apply to you directly, Cully, you drew a version of Blue Beetle, an updated version, right? Mm-hmm. Which did not exist previous to you coming in there and redesigning it, right? I would hope, and if they didn't, you don't have to say, but I would hope that they understood the value of you updating that thing and making it relevant for today's market, and there was you were compensated accordingly for it.
Right. I mean, the way I always look at it is we did not create the Blue Beetle name, right?
Sure.
We created Jaime Reyes. We created his look. We created his family. We created his powers. We created his premise.
Right.
And everything about that book was a wholesale creation except for the name.
For the name. That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is worth a pretty penny, in my opinion, right? And the
especially considering that character has now been around for a good solid 15 years as kind of, a pretty constant character, and there's about to
Yes.
be a movie. It's
Yes.
like, they've made toys, they've gotten a lot out of that character. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
like, I don't look at it as like we just did the next version of Blue Beetle.
Sure.
We did a pretty wholesale creation there.
Right. And that's what I mean. It's like anytime that a publisher comes to you and be like, hey, can you draw this cover? I'm like, you're not just paying me, I understand what your rates are. And to your point earlier, Cully, you're like, well, we really can't afford, right? When you're opening with that bargaining posture, I'm like, I can't talk to you,
Yeah.
You're not just paying me because of whatever pre-existing cover rate that you think most cover artists should be paid. You're paying me because I did all of these things leading into this space where you thought I would be a good fit for your book.
Right.
If the answer is we can't, it's not in our budget to do that because we're bracketed by whatever. I'm like, okay, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But if you somehow implied it's not worth it, that's when you and I will come to terms.
Well, I think that's what they're saying when they come into when their first volley is, well, okay, here's what we can't afford. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe you could find someone who sort of kind of does 50% of what I do. And
for sure,
then you can afford that. But, if you're
Yeah.
going to come into me telling me you think that I'm asking too much before I've even asked for anything, then
right.
Then, maybe we can't come to terms. I mean, look, it's hard to kind of like talk about all this hypothetical negotiation stuff because sometimes you're not in a good bargaining position and it's
Right.
something you want to do. So
Right.
you have to take the risk that they're going to treat you right. But it should be
Sure.
understood that it's a risk on everybody's part.
Right. I think that, is in this day and age, I think there should be something a bit more. They should accommodate how things operate now, as opposed to continuing the legacy of how they've previously
Right.
been operating.
And that comes down to incentive. Do they have any incentive?
Right. No, that's a good point. That's a
And
good point.
maybe they don't.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And I don't know how much. I wonder how much with movies and everything else, and the big companies owning the big companies, how much power that the big two have.
Yeah.
It cuts down to the bone,
Yeah, they totally did. I will say, I do think it's interesting that there's been so much made in the legit entertainment press about how comics creators are not being fully compensated for franchises that earn hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. That's been a big topic in the entertainment press lately. And I'm hoping that conversation doesn't go away because honestly, it's all we've got. We don't have a union. We don't have any sort of collective bargaining power at all. What on earth is that noise?
It's Jason, I bet you.
Yeah, probably.
You're wrong. I was on mute. It was not me.
Okay, who is it?
So, I bet you it was Klaus.
Let's all blame Klaus.
He's hungry. He's hungry.
No, seriously, what is that? That sounds like a
That's-
little growling monster under one of your guys' drafting tables.
It's Klaus. Look, he's making circles.
It sounds like somebody sawing through like a body or something.
It is Klaus.
No, he's using a template.
It is Klaus. He's using his circle. Do it again, Klaus. Do the circle template. There it is.
There we go. Okay.
Wow.
At this moment, I could not be happier.
So is anybody watching out there?
No, it's just us.
Just us?
It's just
Well,
us.
people are commenting, but
Yeah. Well, what are they saying?
They say more Klaus Janson, please.
Yeah.
Uh,
More circle template, please.
What have you missed? I saw a question a second ago, Jason. Somebody by the name of David Jayoki. Right? Do you feel the industry is changing with small publishers like AWA Vault, Bad Idea, getting more friction, treating artists better at Marvel and DC to keep the big name? So it all depends. Like this is my opinion about it. I'd be curious to hear from you guys where you guys see like the thing that Marvel and DC have leverage over is a pre-existing IP that seemingly the globe knows, right? They're keenly aware. It's easily identifiable. It's these brands that, regardless of who draws them, is going to conceptually be pretty exciting, right? Or pretty recognizable. Outside of that, they don't have. Again, from this my limited experience, they don't have much more to offer. Maybe a better page rate, maybe. Assuming that, I don't know. Again, nobody talks about money, which makes me laugh.
But there's a whole new environment that's being created now in the last year. Which,
in what way, Jay?
The NFTs that someone had mentioned it a little while ago.
I knew we were going to go.
Well, it's going to be a big. It's a big.
Tim is skeptical.
Yeah,
Tim is skeptical.
We have to drag Tim into the NFT space, kicking and screaming.
No,
I think,
I just need a little more evidence. That's all.
Okay. What were you saying, Jay?
Cut you off. We can talk about it in a second because there's a few other questions and we can kind of go there. But first, someone asking, what's Tim working on? Let's see some of the art that you guys are doing, and then we can further the conversation.
I think that person was asking not about what's on my board at the moment, but just in life, or am I doing a story or anything like that?
Are they asking about the thing on his board, or are they asking about what's currently on your project plate?
What's on your board, I think, is that's what I want to know.
This is a version of a rejected cover idea for Catwoman When in Rome that I posted on Facebook on my Fans of Tim Sale site. And
I love those guys, by the way.
What, Fans of Tim Sale?
Yeah, the on his Facebook, from time to time I'll catch a post, and they're just so very excited and supportive of everything that they run across that's from Tim.
Yeah, I've been very lucky.
It's very cool. It's a classy place, Tim.
Thank you. I wish I had. I don't know how it happened, except that I'm not a mean guy or something like that. I'm certainly not like Cully, who goes in there and just creates enemies there all the time.
Watch it.
Or Klaus. Yeah, I've never met a more mean guy than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
a bunch of meanies.
Yeah.
I'm more of a lovable curmudgeon. Klaus is flat out mean.
Flat out. It's the teacher in him. Nothing is ever good enough.
Yeah. He's a nasty person.
I can't really disagree with that.
It's very on brand. We've taken a snapshot of it.
There's something. There's a lot to be said about just having no more fucks to give, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, you get that one for free, but this is a PG-13 channel. I don't think we should.
How many fucks did you start out with, Klaus?
3 or 4 fucks, I think.
Quite a bit, actually.
You were fuck wealthy when you started out.
He was the Scrooge McDuck of fucks. He was just diving into a fucking.
He's just a template guy now. Anyway, we got sidetracked. What were we talking about?
You were talking about the image that you were drawing as a.
Yeah, it was originally a rejected, like a 4x6, just really quick sketch.
Yeah.
Cover, and it should have been rejected. This is rejected by Mark Chiarello, by the way. And
suck it, Mark.
And when I posted it, Brian Mulcahy said, "Oh, I'll buy that if you ink it."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, that's what I'm doing." So
right on.
I blew it up a little bit, so it's 9x12 now. But,
I miss the concept of art directors in mainstream comics, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, once you fire Mark, that to me was the okay. Now things have really changed.
How do you mean, Tim?
Well, somebody that respected and accomplished and talented not being thought of as worthy, or if you think you can get along without somebody like that, that is really rare. You're just a different concept from what drew me to DC in a lot of ways, and
Sure.
made me a better artist.
Sure.
For sure.
I think, and I don't know if you guys agree
I
with
mean,
this.
there's still plenty of people there that I enjoy working with. But,
Sure.
It was staggering to me.
Yeah. And I was about to say that I think positions like Mark, because he was not, Mark unique in his ability to like guide projects through and make them really super successful. But people who have been in positions like Mark, that's not a unique position to be in. Unfortunately, back then, the company's culture favored the importance or the value of somebody in that position. I think, to your point, Tim, when I heard that Mark left DC, the shift for me was, I don't think they value that position as far as how it can profoundly impact their projects moving forward.
Yeah. I know that when I first started working with him, or before I sort of started working with him, I knew his reputation, and I knew how much that reputation helped DC attract all kinds of different talents.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's I can count on one hand the kind of people that I would, immediately call back if I ever heard them on my answering machine.
Right.
Mark brought that level of respect to a company, and again, he's not. There's a couple of people on at Marvel too on the editorial side that when I would get a call from them, I'm like, okay, I need to call them back right away because it meant a lot to me that they gave me a call.
Yes. No, I had that experience too.
Yeah. When you get rid of that position, it reflects a particular culture. It reflects culturally on your company that you are either devaluing it, saying like, oh, that's not really an important thing to us anymore. But there's nothing that's left in their vacuum. So what I have a tendency to track is, especially after Mark left, is the quality of art and projects that were being ushered through DC at that point. Right, there was a lot of projects that had potential in its concept, but
Right.
to Cully's point, however long ago, it's a visual medium, man. You need to attract the kind of talent that helps live up to the narratives that you guys are trying to write, or else it's just like, I guess that read well, which has been, it's, speaking parallelly, there's been a really, I don't know if it's purposeful. You guys tell me if this sounds right, but there's been like this really strange shift to de-emphasize artists in recent years. Everything has been so writer-centric, and I'm wondering, what is true. That? I don't understand why they believe that there's a unique value in highlighting one and not simultaneously highlighting the other.
I'll tell you. Here's what I think.
Tell me.
I don't think it's as historically unusual as maybe a lot of people think it is, because when I bring this up, and people always say, well, when in the 90s, the artist was king. And I'm like, the artist was king for 5 years. Okay. But the entire 80, 90 years of comics, or however long it's been, has been either a writer or editorially driven business.
Yeah.
And artists have kind of been along for the ride. I mean, you can point to your exceptions like your Neil Adams and people like that. But for the most part, except for that period of like the very, very late 80s and the very early 90s, which is when I got in, which is when I was allowed to be in this industry.
Me too.
For the most part, artists have not been in the driver's seat. So I always reject that argument of like that there has been a historical kind of like devaluing of artists. I think we've settled back down to how artists have always been perceived.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of it that way.
The difference is that there's so much more media attention right now.
Mm-hmm.
The media landscape at large has changed, and the media landscape has become very writer-centric, writer-producer-centric, just in general. So that when people talk about comics in the media conversation, they gravitate towards what seems familiar to them, which is the writers and the producers and everything. Artists tend to work in art departments and realize writers' visions. And I think people are applying that to comics, and it's sort of seeped into the groundwater, you know?
Yeah. No, when I was, for the tiny bit of time that I worked on a TV show, everything that was happening was that actors would try to create a comic book as a screenplay, an illustrated screenplay.
Yeah, and that's still happening.
And so hire the cheapest people you can, and the actor's name would be how it would possibly sell. And it's the same kind of thing, you know, that it's not, and I always go back to this, and it's kind of unfair, but or it is unfair, but I would say this has been happening longer than what you were describing, Eric. Like Y the Last Man, around that time, Neil Gaiman of the world stuff, right? Alan Moore before that, where the writer was the star.
Sure.
And maybe the character, or with Y, it was a completely original idea and or original character and that kind of stuff. And the art just became less interesting. It was less centric. It wasn't about.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up when the art was really the thing I wanted to do. I mean, look, the three biggest creators in the 80s that I followed were Jaime Hernandez, Dave Sim, and Miller towards the end. And that was certainly about the stories. They were all interesting writers. But
they were all writers, period. I mean, the era of the writer artist is not what it was.
Right. Right.
No,
maybe the reason why I have my bias is because I've just been so, as an artist, that's what I'm paying attention to, and so I see an explosion of exciting visuals in comics early 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And I thought like, wow, there has been, I guess for me, it felt like there was a bar that was set when it came to the level of craft, especially when it came to mainstream comics, right? You are graduating into this space as opposed to starting off here. And I don't know, because I again, my biased opinion, I don't know if there is such a better emphasis these days, or as heavy an emphasis these days on bringing in people who are, oh gosh, this is not the right term, but it's like who are worthy of that space, artistically, right? I feel like they are somehow landing in that space at a coin flip from time to time, right? Like I don't understand what value, especially given the history of some of these mainstream books, what value or what additive they're bringing when they're drawing those books. I don't. And then I guess it's answered by what we talked about earlier, which is, well, these are the ones that they can afford.
Yeah.
Let me add something. I'm curious just to hear what you guys have to say about this. But in a sense, it goes back to the earlier part of this conversation about Mark Chiarello. Mark certainly knew his stuff.
Yes.
I mean, there wasn't any doubt about that. And the discussion about, or the debate about, how is it that the artist has been diminished, or their value has been diminished.
Mm.
And part of the reason why Mark is no longer at DC is because the artist has been diminished. That area of expertise is not held in as high a value as it should be, I think.
Mm.
And Mark was someone who routinely fought for artists' interests.
Yes, and that and I wanted to mention that. You're absolutely right, Cully, that, to have Mark at DC, he was an advocate for artists in general and yourself in particular. And just to get a pat on the back from Mark was valuable,
Sure.
But I think that, the main point is that I wanted to make, and I don't know if this is really true or not, that I think that part of the reason why art and artists have become less than writers is because art is hard, and it's hard to understand, and it's hard to have an opinion about it. It requires, I think, a lot of education. I mean, I couldn't possibly teach composition in 2 semesters,
Right.
because there's just so much, about composition. I mean, how do you teach a civilian composition? And most of the people that populate the industry come from a writing background. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I wonder, is it simply that art is hard? Because, writing's hard, but art is, for lack of a better term, to a lot of people, magic. It's something that they don't, not many people can do this.
It's absolutely,
people can write, can learn the craft of writing to various degrees. Maybe they are not going to be a genius at it, but they can learn to write competently. More people can learn to write competently than can learn to draw this specific discipline that we all practice competently.
Well, if you just break it down, more people can write a sentence than.
Sure. And even people who aren't writers, if they can read and write, they're familiar with the tools that you use to create a story. Not so with what we do. We use all these kind of weird arcane things that people don't understand. They just watch us do it, and it's a magic trick to them.
Yeah.
I think that's what Mark
had many
represented as well, right? Like Mark had the eyeball, the experience, and the DNA to understand when somebody has crossed that quality bar threshold.
Right.
And it was now ready for prime time.
You cannot explain it. And that's the thing that I run into a lot of times when I look at like what some companies are doing. I'm like, if they had a Mark Chiarello, that would not have been published.
Right. But great point, Cully. I think it makes me ask, are they no longer in the business of doing what Mark was heralding, or guys like Mark were heralding?
I think guys like Mark are rare.
Yeah, if we're maintaining that it's still true, which is superhero comics are aspirational, blah blah blah. These are the best that these are the people that we're conceptually, story wise, we're allowed to look up to. They're the best versions of us, and so on and so forth, right? And therefore that's exemplified by proportion and just the way they're drawn and just the shots that you take. Of course, I'm in agreement with you, but if a company doesn't even know that, because it's so far gone from the things that they value as a culture, then we can't. It would be almost unfair to go like, how come you guys don't have your shit together? I'm sorry, PG-13. How come you guys don't have your poop together?
Eric,
what?
If your comic book, which is badly drawn and badly written, is the #1 comic that month.
Yes.
What incentive does anyone have to improve on that?
Well, that's an age-old question. I mean, that's been going on as long as there have been comics.
Yeah, but I also believe that that position, that exercise has a very short shelf life, right? Because it's not as simple as it was, to Cully's point, like as long as that concept has been around, things now are vying for your attention,
Yeah.
right? So you are compelled to, as best as you can, produce a version of quality that's representative of the thing that you're working on, or else people will move on to the next thing. They catch on very quickly.
Who does?
So-
As fans, I'm just curious. When did you guys, as fans, let's put it a different way. There was a point when I was, I don't know, mid-teens or something like that, when I thought, oh, the new stuff is better because everybody's gotten better because they've learned more stuff. I'm talking about professional artists.
Mm-hmm,
And so I was shocked when I saw some great early Eisner stuff. And I just thought that wasn't around because there was so much bad stuff happening. Well, coming out of studios and coming out of, people just coming back from the war, going to make a living, and all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
But I thought in my mind at that point, it was just, well, things advance as you go along, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And then I realized that no, there's all kinds of reasons why stuff happens.
Yeah. Modern comics, most people go like, oh, it's drawn really, really poorly, which is super unfair, right?
I don't think that's even true.
Yeah. I think my attitude more is, I don't know if there is a cultural within the comics itself, right? If it's within their culture to establish art as a really high bar to reach for, right? You can get by with just enough in modern mainstream. It doesn't make it trash, but it certainly doesn't make it exceptional. Do you know what I mean, Cully? You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I mean, look, from an illustration standpoint, I would venture to say that this current generation of artists that we have in comics, may be the best we've ever had.
Really?
From a pure illustration standpoint.
How do you figure?
Which I am separating from storytelling, which is what we're supposed to be doing. I think that the best artists that we have in comics are amazing illustrators. I look around and I'm not as engaged by the storytelling because the storytelling is being controlled from a textural standpoint as opposed to a visual standpoint.
Sure.
And I think that there is less of a training up of visual storytellers than there used to be.
Right. But you see what I mean?
I got in at a point when I think that visual storytelling was kind of at a low point because the early 90s, it was not really about. It was about bombast. It wasn't about so much, kind of advancing storytelling.
Right.
But there was still holdover from a previous culture that did value storytelling.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So it still
stuff
snuck its way in there somehow. I think now, I'm in line with you, which is I don't think they know how to do sequential stuff to save their life. But I also,
I
don't
wouldn't be
know
quite
if
so
they're-
harsh,
if they're-
but
yeah.
But I do think part of the reason, Eric, that sequential has become, I don't know, fallen out of favor, perhaps, is that ironically that writers have become stronger in their directions in terms of the script.
Yeah.
So a lot of artists from this generation, and frankly the generation even before this one, haven't grown up with the idea of being able to tell a story visually.
Sure.
That they rely way too much on the writer's direction.
That could be double-sided though, right?
Yeah.
As writers are sort of looking at the talent pool out there, they come to analyze that they're not very good storytellers. So in turn, they believe they're compelled to be more heavy-handed with, direction, with like shot selection and so on. And it just helps to make things worse, right? Because
that's exactly right. We're in a conundrum.
Yep.
Well, and I do think that that's why I made the distinction earlier between textual storytelling and visual storytelling.
Sure.
We are relying on the words to an outsized degree.
Right. Let me add to that, Cully. I completely agree with you. You know, the word that you're using, textural, is so interesting. The word that I use, I think, to describe the same thing is spectacle. That the kind of illustration that is so popular these days is reliant on the spectacle of the scene or the technique, and what you're describing as textural. And we're not really talking about design or composition.
Well, sure, and I think that this has a lot to do with the writer's perception of their connection to the audience. And let me expand on that a little bit. What I run into a lot of times is the writer thinks, and I don't want to turn this into a bag writers thing, because there's some really good writers in comics right now who understand what the gig is. And I think more experienced writers, the ones that stick around a little while, they get this eventually. But there is a feeling I've run into with some writers where they think they're talking to the audience. And what they need to understand is, no, you're talking to the artist who talks to the audience. And that's where you get more visual comics. If you're trying to get across to the artist what you're trying to get across, the artist, if he or she is a good one, will turn around and facilitate that vision with you. And I think a lot of writers think that no, my tool is my words.
Yeah.
And it's not. I mean, what I like to say to people is, when you're reading a novel, for example, the imagery is provided by the description. Okay. When you are reading a comic book, the imagery is provided literally by the imagery. So we have to look at the relationship between the writer and the artist as one where, the writer may have a vision, that writer turns to the artist, and the artist helps facilitate that vision to the reader.
Yes.
And too many writers, especially coming into the business, new writers, look at themselves almost as novelists, and they're not really, they're textualists. They're about the text, and the text should not be carrying the full weight of the storytelling to the audience.
And
it's funny that you mentioned that, because we were talking earlier about the role that Mark Chiarello sort of fulfilled, right? The role that he took, which is I would suspect that at some point Mark ran into his fair share of how you referred to him as like great illustrators, Cully, right?
Yeah.
But he was looking for something else. And I know this from personal experience in dealing with him, right? He was looking for something else. He was looking for a storyteller. You can be an amazing illustrator, but he understood that relationship that you were referring to.
Right.
And they hired accordingly. So it's not just an art director that he represented. He represented the culture of, hey, as I hire people on, or as I recommend them internally, it's not just about them drawing pretty pictures. They need to understand the job that they're doing. Right. And so it does a fair amount of heavy lifting on the visual end, that the writer can then say, oh, I don't have to be overly descriptive. This doesn't have to be a caption box full comic book experience. This actually can be done by the artist, right? But again, you de-emphasize that. Right. You say, hey, we don't need somebody like Mark anymore, because these writers are basically filling in the gaps for the audience that the artist can't draw, right? That the artist can't storytell their way through. That, I think that's why we've landed into the I'll say this softly, like the boring space that we have now when I'm looking at most recent comic book art. I've downloaded a lot just to try to catch up, just to say, like, just so I'm not speaking on a turn, like, just like some weird general feeling that's uninformed by nothing, right? Like, I downloaded a ton, and I go like, holy mackerel, these guys are, who is running the art ship over there? Who is course correcting?
You hit on it right there, because there was a period in comics where at least a fair number of your rank and file editors were artists. You had your Dick Giordanos, you had your Joe Kuberts, you had your people like that. You don't really have that now. You don't really, and part of that is economic. And I remember Dan DiDio saying to me at one point, because I'll say right now, like, over the years, over the past like probably 15 years or so, there have been a couple of times where DC has come to me and sort of floated the possibility of me coming on staff in some capacity as an editor, as whatever. But I remember Dan saying to me at one point, we can only pay you this much as an editor. Do you want to come on staff, or do you, and make this much, or you want to be an artist and have the potential to make this other stuff? And I'm like, well, I'd rather have more earning potential, and I would rather have, the ability to do creator-owned work or to do a cover for somebody if I want to. And editors don't make anything. I mean, and I think that's part of the problem is they don't pay editors anything.
I agree. It is a clear snapshot of what a company's culture values, or at least they have an understanding of how important that position is.
They value the IP. That's what they value.
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's like having a well-run team and going like, well, the medical staff isn't really all that important. And you're
right, right. And you know what? I've going back to the writer artist thing. I've actually made this analogy before, where the writers right now in comics are the doctors, and the artists are the nurses.
Yeah.
And in the sense that the writers come in and they make decisions, and they sort of seemingly run things, but the nurses, the artists, are kind of the grunts who actually sort of facilitate things.
Sure. Sure. That's a good analogy.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It works. It works for me.
Okay. All right.
Are there questions?
I have tons.
Samuel Rojas asks, is there something Klaus puts major emphasis on when he is teaching his courses?
His looks. Sorry, Klaus.
His well-exercised thighs.
His French curves, and his ellipses.
The emphasis, Sam, is I think a lot of what we're talking about this afternoon. Clarity, storytelling, being able to communicate information, and also entertainment. So
all of it is what Klaus is saying.
Pardon?
What? It's storytelling.
So all of it is what you're getting at, Klaus. Get good is what you're saying. Get good, you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's storytelling.
Storytelling, yeah. But I don't eliminate, being entertaining or giving the readers something to look at. I think.
Yeah.
No, that's part of storytelling.
Yeah, it's like who wants to watch or listen to or read a bad story that's not entertaining?
Right, or boring is the way I would put it. There has to be something there, and so I believe in the spectacle too. I just don't believe that it's the thing that
definitely.
No, in the scripts that I worked with from Jeff, and by the way, he doesn't describe it a whole lot. It's really much more like a movie script. Just kind of basically something, but I want to know a few things always. Is this the first time we're seeing Batman? If so, I want that clear in the just because I'm lazy. I want that clear in the script so that I can make it a wow thing. And the wow moments are part of storytelling.
Yes. And don't you also take into account that you guys were talking about boring. I'm using air quotes at the moment, but like we use the term boring, but I think depending on the audience that you are drawing that thing for, you have to have an understanding of them. So Tim's example is perfect, right? Which is you cater the shot not just for the reveal, but also the audience needs to have an experience with whatever it is that you end up drawing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what sometimes, when you're drawing superhero comic books, like indie books, that doesn't make sense to me because that's not what it's for, right? If you have a style that sometimes is appropriate for a mainstream superhero comic book, and I believe in this wholly, like it may only fit sometimes, once in a blue moon, but it is not a superhero comic book style. I don't understand why we are trying to infuse mainstream comic books with an indie style that's not at all fitting for the look that it's going for the IP that it's trying to help build up. I don't know what that is. And that goes back to guys like Mark missing from their positions now.
Yeah, but it has to be a blend. I mean, I could draw a book well, I can't draw a book like Jaime Hernandez, but you could have it in something like Love and Rockets that everybody just falls in love with just by the way it looks, right? But it's an indie comic.
Yeah.
But you can, if you then turn the page and there was a big wow moment.
Yeah, appropriate to.
So that's what. Yes, I mean.
Yeah, appropriate to a Love and Rockets type of story, right?
Sure.
What I'm trying to say is that anytime somebody takes a Jaime and tries to shoehorn them into an X-Men book, tries to shoehorn them into a Thor and Avengers book, that's when I go like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
It doesn't until it does.
How do you mean? How do you mean, Colin?
In the sense that it doesn't make any sense unless the audience responds to it. Then it makes a whole lot of us.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but it's rare that happens.
I agree.
In as far as like when it does make sense, that oh wow, that really was super profound and super impactful and financially super successful, right? But you can count that on two hands when that's happened. Otherwise, understand your product.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I don't think that that's going to stop people from trying, but no, I agree that it's so rare that, it's almost silly to try sometimes, but it does happen.
My buddy Bale is asking how upset was Jason when he found out that there wasn't going to be any original art for Arc Athena to sell.
I disowned Eric.
We don't talk anymore. Yeah, Jason has forgotten my number. He never picks up my phone calls.
He's giving me his firstborn instead.
David says, has anyone here ever had art rejected by an editor? If so, what is usually done with the rejected art? Gentlemen?
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. Sure. I have a good two finished issues of a series that will never see print. From a major publisher.
Is that true?
Well, there have been a number of times I've drawn whole stories that never saw print. But
what happens, Cully? What is it unique to each and every single one, or just something comes down and you're like, that's not going to see print?
Well, this particular situation was, not to go too far into it, but it just was clear that I was hitting too many roadblocks, sort of editorially with what I wanted to do the book, as opposed to what the editor wanted me to do with the book, and it became clear that we just weren't going to really go forward on it. I remember being asked, I'm like, do you even still want to do this? And I was kind of like, no, actually, I really don't. So we just decided to shelve the whole thing. It was something that I was writing. I had co-written.
Oh my God.
I had co-written like 3 issues. I think we had outlined like 10 issues, and I had fully drawn 2.
Wow.
And actually, Jason has the art. It's one of those things where we'll show it to people privately and, maybe even sell it. But it's one of those things where, it'll just never see the light of day, probably. Unless, I die and somebody does a retrospective or something. Which,
that's a bit morbid.
Huh?
Unless you die, are you planning on a eternal life or something?
Or do you know something I don't?
That's what I'm asking you.
Is there like a piano like hanging by a wire and over me or something?
Just off screen, actually.
You just said, unless I die.
Yeah, I should say unless I die next week, Tim.
Be very specific, because Tim has the long knives out.
Tim's got to hold me to certain standards rhetorically here. But
John B. Watson is asking, for all of you, what is a concrete example where an art director helped bring your art or a specific project to the next level? Gentlemen.
Chiarello would, when I was working on Dark Victory, which is when I really started working with Mark, he would call me in the middle of the day and we would talk for 4 hours. And it wasn't about Batman or anything I was doing. he was just sharing art and talking about, hey, top 5 movies you've ever, that kind of thing.
So on brand.
And at some point, I would have to remind him, you're my boss. I should get back to work. But during that time, I came to realize that I was just gaining so much enthusiasm for what I was doing. And I had this is right at the beginning of when I had a computer.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have a computer all through the 90s.
Good for you.
Well, okay, but I
Okay.
didn't. I say that only because I didn't have access to all kinds of artwork that was out there to be seen.
Oh, I see.
Unless I could find a book. And
Right.
the real book revival of illustration art, for instance, hadn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would say, hey, have you seen this person? Have you seen Cully? Have you seen Dave Johnson? Have you seen E.O. Hurst? Have you seen, just all over the place. And now I'm fortunate enough to have enough money where I can buy some books and that there are books available.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot of stuff on the computer. But anyway, that the amount of work that he exposed me to.
There you go.
That was inspirational.
Yeah.
I mean, just his Toth experiences.
Yeah. Klaus, you've served as art director for projects before, have you not?
I don't think so, Eric. I think.
No.
What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about something?
No, I'm thinking about like having enough teaching notches under your belt, I would say. That at some point I had thought that they had reached out to you and say, hey, can you help visually, artistically give this thing some guidance? Have you not fulfilled that capacity before?
I think I've in that capacity, I've done workshops at Marvel and DC.
That's right.
Years. Yeah,
that's right.
Right, but not as a official on staff kind of art director. So, I've tried to pass on some knowledge or information to editorial. Really, that's
yeah.
And at times also artists. I mean, both. I've addressed editorial and different artists through DC and Marvel and other companies. So in that capacity, which has been great fun. I'm doing one now, as a matter of fact. I'm doing one for Boom.
Are you really?
Yeah. And they're wonderful. The staff is just amazing. I get to know the people, and Matt, who's the editor-in-chief, is just terrific. Extremely knowledgeable people, full of hunger, and they have a real appetite for learning and for knowing things. It's a great experience to be able to do that. Also, by the way, incredibly nerve-wracking.
In what sense?
Well, you want to do a good job. You don't want them to think you're an idiot.
You're one of those guys. You're one of the guys that likes doing good jobs, I guess.
I'll tell you something. On that subject, you want to do a good job. I realized recently, I'll just tell you that my shrink told me that I have a real need to be perfect. And that's a real big part of my personality, which is a revelation to me. I was just so appreciative of that. But when he said that, he said to me, you got to get rid of this need to be perfect. And I thought to myself, yeah. If I manage to do that, then I'll be perfect.
Listen,
oh God,
that was an amazing anecdotes. I'm fully distracted by whoever it is that's trying to break into Jason's house right now.
Yeah.
via fucking pinball hammer. Jason, mute your damn microphone when people are talking, will you?
I thought it was muted. That's the
I
workers
thought I
here.
was muted. Yeah.
I suspect the only reason I brought that came to me that it might be you because you're like, oh, I had people working in my bathroom today, and I'm all like, yep. Unless there's somebody else who has hammering features built into their house right now.
Don't provoke Jason, or he'll tell you, in great detail everything about his new bathroom.
You guys want to hear about this bathroom? It's amazing.
No, very little.
No, because we know what you're going to do in there, and I don't want to think about it.
Once we run out of subject matter,
talk about.
once we run out of other subject matters to talk about, and even then, just barely, still no.
Yeah.
All right.
Cully,
so
have you had art directors before?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah?
I've had people who mentored me, of course.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, Mark is a big one. Just, I don't want to like sort of keep talking about, Tim, did a great job talking about Mark, but, Mark was definitely kind of in my corner at DC a lot of the way. Stelfreeze was a pretty big mentor for me when
Sure.
I spent, 18, 19 years in a studio with him.
Yeah.
And he was a huge influence on me, and sometimes was kind of a de facto art director, like in the sense of like I'd do something, go, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. This is working.
Right.
This isn't. Here's how you fix this, and
Right.
So it was very much, in addition to being a friendship, there was kind of like we sort of mutually art directed each other a lot of the time before we even would turn something in.
Yeah.
How similar are you in ages?
In ages?
Well,
Brian is probably a good 8 or 9 years older than I am.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Or 30. I don't know. Could be anything. It's like, it's funny because like, when we all started that studio or like joined that studio, it's like, some people were very, very much considered, more on the young side. Some people were considered on the old side. And, looking back, it's like none of us were all that far apart in age. It's just, we just sort of, those are the roles that we kind of ended up in.
Right.
But if you're asking like if I've ever kind of been an art director, I mean, kind of like Klaus, maybe not officially, but like when I worked on New 52, that was very definitely an art directing, like a freelance art director kind of a situation.
Right.
Because I touched almost everything.
Yeah.
Jim and I pretty much Jim Lee and I worked very closely on that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've kind of been on both sides of it. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
me personally, I've worked on a bunch of animation productions. That's my background. That's how I came up because I couldn't quite make it into comics well enough. And any animation production, you're almost compelled to deal with an art director in some capacity, whether they be in the executive producer role, which is sort of unofficial because it's not necessarily their vision, but it's certainly a project that they're heralding to air, or in the case of, let's say, Tron was art directed by a fellow by the name of Alberto Mielgo, and Alberto is a visionary. He's freaking amazing. If you guys have seen, what is it, Sex, Love, and Robots? He's the one that did segment called The Witness, which to this day he still claims it was not motion captured at all. Which I kind of look at him hinky, but I trust him. He's amazing. He's got such a great vision, and he helped set up what Tron ultimately looked like. He was also one of the early contributors to the Spider-Man movie that came out, Into the Spider-Verse. Apparently, he was unceremoniously let go from that project, but that's because he's a fiery dude. But so in how he helped me, every art director that I've ever run across, from him to somebody like, I guess by a de facto Bruce Timm being an art director, and then Peter Chung way back in the day when I was significantly younger by 2 decades, like each of them inspired me to. The way they inspired me is because they helped me understand a level of craft for each of those productions. It cannot be any lower than their best. you know? And that's pretty compelling, right? Especially when you're young, especially when you're trying to break in and make a good impression with not just your coworkers, but obviously the people that you report into. Though that's how I was inspired by those guys, because not only could they talk it, but they also could do it, right?
Yeah.
Are any of the pieces of art you guys are drawing for sale? I know that I scrolled up earlier and you guys, the Mr. Freeze is accounted for, yes?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Cully,
The
is
thing
your piece for sale?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish it and then give it to Jason and let him sell it. Yeah. So yes, it's for sale.
All right.
Answer
While
is
you're
yes.
at it, though, can you that blue beetle you did last week? Can you show that as well?
Yes. Let me find it real quick.
And while as Cully is looking for it, somebody in chat, Diane Lynn asks, question for everyone, is there a project that's the one that got away for you? Klaus or Tim or Cully? That looks freaking great, Cully. Man.
Wow.
That looks so freaking awesome.
Wow, Cully. Yeah.
I regret not inking the Long Halloween.
Really?
Wow.
Me too.
I didn't realize you were up for that.
Well, Klaus, do you want to tell a story, or?
No, go ahead. You tell the story.
I was freaking out that my job at the time, or as it was conceived, was penciling and inking a book a month.
Wow.
And that is in fact what happened. But I was talking with Archie and I said, realistically, we should think about, getting me some help. What's Angelo Torres doing? I just went, because of his background at Warren, I was, like, who can we grab from back then? And he said, no, that'll work. And then I said, well, fuck, the best guy around is this Janson fellow. And Klaus and I ended up talking on the phone for like an hour and a half, which now doesn't seem unusual because that's what we do. But
did you know each other well at the time?
No, not at all. Right? I mean, have I got that right?
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. And this is
Actively, from Klaus' part, by the way, actively did not want to know anything about Tim. Continue, Tim.
And Klaus turned it down. I'll let him address as to why. But I just took it on. Now, adjacent to that, on my feed, there you go. Thank you, Jason. Klaus, do you remember these pages?
I don't see what is Jason showing pages?
He is. Yeah.
On my feed.
On the main screen.
Oh, I don't. I don't.
Okay, well, your inking
Maybe
is
bring it closer to the camera.
Is on the right. Okay, let's do this.
Oh, is that the war story, Tim?
It is.
Ah, yeah. Okay, now I see it. Yeah.
Highway of Death was the.
Yeah.
And that's the first collaboration we ever had.
Wow.
What I knew of Klaus's work was, well, obviously with Frank, but then with JR, and especially the Punisher stuff. And I said, well, that's a really graphic look that I just love, and it's the kind of stuff I try to do and can't do that well, and I'm learning how to do. And so we had this conversation, and we talked a lot about the music in Seattle in the early 90s and stuff like that. But eventually Klaus said, no, I don't think I can take it.
So Klaus, what was it? What was the deciding factor for you? Was it schedule?
Probably
Yes,
a year.
It was scheduled. Yeah. It
Yeah,
was,
probably a year long gig.
Yeah, I had a conflict, and honestly, I remember turning down Long Halloween. I cannot remember what the project was. So that tells you, where my heart was.
Mm.
I wonder what it was. I don't know.
Cully, anything that slipped by you that made you go like, man, I wish I took that opportunity.
That's a good question. It's funny. Like I can think of something that I was approached about and ended up not doing that I am glad I didn't, because the guy they got to do it was more appropriate for it than I was.
Sure.
There was a book in the early 90s called Starman.
Sure.
That I was approached about, and the writer of the book, James Robinson, had a few different things going. And one of the things he had pitched was Starman, and another book that he had pitched was called Firearm at Malibu. And I read both of them, and I thought, Firearm seems a little bit more like something I can hang my hat on. And so I ended up doing that. Yeah. And the reason, Tony Harris obviously, took Starman and was a way better choice for it than I was, not just stylistically and not just because of his sensibility and his commitment to it, but he would lasted a lot longer on the book than I would have. I think I did like 6 issues of Firearm and then moved on. And I probably would have done 6 issues of Starman and moved on. And Tony was on that book for years. And I think that was a better choice for what they had in mind.
It's interesting that you say that, Kyle. Can you talk more about how he lasted? You said, I can't recall how you said it, but it's like he lasted on that book longer than you would have. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. His sort of, I'm not a monthly guy, and so that's something that's taken me a long time to understand, is that I'm not someone who I can do multiple issues of something, but there comes a point where I just start to run out of steam.
Sure.
And need to do something else.
Yeah. I'm the same way.
Yeah. And it's just the kind of artist that I am. And so, Tony, I think, had a much more of a commitment to the book. And, I think that he also, his sensibility as an artist fit what James wanted on that book more than I would have, especially at the time. Because this was mid-90s, 93, 94 or something like that.
Right on.
Yeah. And, I was very much in flux for the first 10, 15 years of my career in terms of what my stuff looked like. Tony was a lot more consistent. And was a lot more kind of knew who he was than I did.
Yeah. So not directly, but sort of indirectly. That's kind of the one that got away, right? But
in a way,
it went to a better, more appropriate artist. Is what
that's what I think. I hesitate to call it the one that got away because I've never really regretted it or anything. Right. But it was something that was presented to me that I kind of went, yeah, I don't know, and that was just the right choice, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, nothing ever got away because I'm a shameless whore, and I'll draw anything that was put in front of me.
That's kind of how I am. I can't think of anything that got away because I've taken most of the things that have been offered to me.
I could tell you one that got away, Eric.
Tell me the story.
There's a story about Batgirl and her first night out.
We're gonna end up talking about Mark Chiarello this entire freaking stream, but I can give you guys context on the story that Jason was talking about. At one point, and Jay, I'm gonna need you to jump in here from time to time just so I get the story straight, because there's parts of it that's super hazy to me now, being so long ago. But at one point, I was offered to write and draw my own Batgirl story, my own miniseries. And I had actually generated about as many as 5 pages for that miniseries. And between Mark and I think Jim, back when Jim still favored my work, they were really gung-ho for it and effectively greenlit it on the spot, Jay?
Yes. Now the background story from that was, at the time, Stefan was part of the group, and he did a commission for Rico, which had Batgirl kind of out and about, and Batman's in the background, hiding out. So we took that idea and said, "Oh, wouldn't it be fun to just do a story about Batgirl's first night out?"
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, "Yeah, let's do that," and proceeded to just make those 5 or 8 pages of samples to show to Mark, to which he's like, "Yeah, let's fucking do this."
Yep.
That was like 10 years ago.
That's the one that got away from Jason.
Well, for me, yeah, because that would have been my dipping my toe into the pool there. I still have those pages. They're here somewhere.
Yeah. I don't regret not doing them, because I genuinely believe that as a writer, I didn't know how to do it well. And I know on more than a handful of occasions, Jason, you reached out to some of your writer associates and say, "Hey, Eric's got this idea. Would you mind coming in and polishing whatever turd comes out of him?" And they were pretty open to that, which is I'm very, very grateful for. But again, my heart wasn't in it because I didn't think that I would do a very good job. I would probably have drawn the shit out of it in order to make up for the fact that the story wasn't very good. The concept I believed in. It's in the execution, not having enough sort of experience under me to be very confident about whether or not it was going to be, at the very least, personally successful. So that's why I never regretted not doing it. Looking back, it was a lot of the pages, generating the pages were a lot of fun. That caused me a lot of excitement, but there was no way I was going to be able to pull that off well.
I disagree.
Again, it's the one that got away from you, not on me.
Yeah.
Well, until we could have retired on all the residuals from the amount of sales we would have done.
Who knows, man? It's so unpredictable what's going to be good these days, in as far as what's going to sit on the shelf long term. And I don't know if there's any sort of initiative to make that happen anymore anyway,
Yeah.
John, let me read this question. John B. Watson asks, what was the moment that felt revelatory as far as defining an art style, or even just a breakthrough moment when you felt things were falling into place, figuring out how to tell a story with sequential art? For me, I think I was so hung up on I wanted to be Kevin Nolan so bad. Like, I don't know what that was, but I wanted to. Jason can find old pieces of artwork where I did it so poorly that it was almost embarrassing to claim that my inspiration was Kevin Nolan. But at one point, when I wasn't fast enough to do comics and I couldn't make a living at it, I had to go back into animation, tail between my legs, hat in my hand, asking for whatever job I could get. I accidentally fell into working for Warner Brothers Animation. And I say accidentally because it's like, to my point earlier, whatever came across my plate that was going to pay me and keep me employed, I was on board and I was going to take that on. But it wasn't because I wasn't going to try my best. So at one point when I was storyboarding on that show, on Justice League Unlimited and I think on Legion, a handful of those, that look that Bruce had, built a house on, because it was storyboards, and it was, if you think about the math, right, storyboarding a 7-minute sequence, back when this was still being done on paper and not digital, it was about 300 sheets of paper, if not more, because it's a boys action adventure show. Each 11 by 17, 8.5 by 14, one of those.
Wow.
Each of them had 3 panels each, okay? You multiply that by 21 some odd minutes, you multiply 300 pages times like 900 plus drawings at any given time for a 7-minute sequence. And that was when I realized I can't be precious about these drawings anymore. I have to just draw it and get it as clear as possible what my intent was, what each character was emoting, what, from progressing from one scene to the other. So heavy emphasis on composition, heavy emphasis on acting and sort of like capturing the body language. And from there, that's what translated into the style that I'm utilizing now, which is sort of like a semi-polished version of how we used to storyboard. If you want to have an example of what that really looked like before I started, adding more detail as I do now, it's when I did Iron Man Enter the Mandarin. That style was so close to me storyboarding, and that's why I did those pages. I was able to do those pages so super fast. Anyway, that's it for me. What about you guys? Moment that felt revelatory art style wise that made you go, okay, this feels good.
Wow.
That's a great question, by the way, John.
No big moments for me. A lot of small moments.
Mm.
Like I knew from an early age, excuse me, how attracted I was to for lack of a better term, an Alex Toth approach of a strong contrast, and working with black as a part of the composition, not just as a storytelling element. Or what the hell is that? Is that Jason again?
It's Jason again. Anytime there's some background noise, it's always going to be Jason.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, I recognize his farts by now, but I don't really.
By smell or by sound?
Thankfully, we can't smell them through Zoom.
Yeah, I think he just records them and then just texts them to Tim. Hey Tim, this one's this got a lot on the low end. Listen to this one.
I wish that was the joke, but anyway, stuff like that, little things. A lot of it is no surprise. A lot of black and white work. So I'll reference Sim and Hernandez again, but also so many people from the Warren era of black and white comics. I never seen Wash before Neil Adams. And or just doing a whole goddamn story in pencil, as he did in Creature from the Sea, something like that. Anyway, and it all just looked so amazing.
Yeah.
So
not one big turning point, Tim. You're saying like
little. Yeah, I didn't. There was no. As far as career goes, it when Jeff and I split, because he got a great deal from Marvel, and I was still under contract with DC. I was freaking out about who I would work with, because I hadn't worked with anybody other than Jeff in at least a decade. But there was no project, there was no thing that kind of got away. No, I can't think of one.
Okay, Klaus, for you, what's the big turning moment for your stylistically, your body of work, storytelling, and whatever else?
I probably would agree with Tim. There wasn't really a big one, but a lot of little ones.
Klaus, when
meeting me and Cully, I'm sure was very profound, right?
Yeah. What Not to Do by Eric Cully.
I am still recovering from that.
I knew it. I can feel it from here.
Other than Klaus, other than let's say Chuck Davis or whatever you say, but what are the principal? What were the people you looked at a lot and wanted to emulate when you started?
I grew up with when Neil Adams came on the scene. Right. When Steve Ditko was doing Spider-Man.
when John Buscema started, doing 3 books a month for Marvel.
How many?
Yeah, he was
Oh,
doing
3?
He
Yeah,
did 5 sometimes.
He was doing Submariner. He was doing Avengers. He was doing some other book.
Jeez
So
Louise.
there
That
was
was
a
back when
period
he
of
was
time when he was doing 3 books a month, and Gil Kane. I mean, from Gil, I probably learned a lot of design and composition, or composition, maybe not so much design. Alfonso Font, my favorite foreign artist. I learned a lot about texture and detail. Tom Palmer, another one that I learned about texture and color. Alex Toth, of course, guys like that. Sampaio, using black and white.
Right.
All sorts of different. Dick Giordano's line, the thick line and the thin line, creating volume, creating depth.
That goes back to Neil too, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. But I think I'll just say honestly, the thing that I point to as pivots in my, let's say, if I could be pretentious in my evolution as an artist.
Please do.
I love it.
Well, yeah, but there were 2. One was working with Frank, and Frank letting me take more responsibility for the work, for the book, for Daredevil, and then the second one was teaching. I realized when I was started teaching, I knew nothing. I mean, literally knew nothing. That it was all instinct. All the work that I'd been doing prior to that was just instinct. And then when I started teaching, I had to verbalize it and actually come up with some sort of a construction or theory. And that was a big deal for me. I mean, that was really that was a big pivot. So.
And about what year was that?
91 was the teaching, and then the beginning of the 80s was Daredevil. So those were pretty instrumental.
Yeah. No, I knew the Daredevil stuff. I didn't know the other. But okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Cully, the Blue Beetle. So to Diane, just read her name on the back.
Hey, cool, Diane. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's amazing of you. How long does this stream typically go on for, Jay? Are we not coming up on the 2 hours?
It's 3. It's really whenever you guys are finished with whatever you're finished with. We can
yammering on. Yeah. I haven't looked at any of the comments, so
I haven't either.
We've been trying to keep up with them, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's anything you want to bring up for me,
what does Klaus think about an idea / story that sticks? Being The Dark Knight Returns does just that still.
I'm not sure
an
what
idea
that
that
means.
sticks.
yeah, what is that sentence?
Let's all think about it together, and then we'll come back to it. Mag says, a question for all. Would you say that American comics are far more sterile, art-wise, compared to its European counterparts? No, I wouldn't say far more sterile.
Well,
Define sterile.
as opposed to like Serpieri or Crepex or somebody.
That's what I mean. I don't. It's such a broad question that I don't know in what context. You know,
They're different.
Let me just say hi to Amin Amat, who asked that last question. Amin was there you go. Amin, it's good to see you. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean
Klaus,
to.
one of my favorite things about sitting near you at cons is when previous students come up to you and you always remember them. You always are so respectful and pleased to see them.
That means a lot to me, Tim. Thanks.
That's
just
because
a great experience.
Klaus
I'm gonna
Klaus
start
is a man
hiring.
of class.
I'm gonna start hiring random people to walk up to Klaus and claim to be former students, just to see what he does.
I suspect he'll know them too, just super randomly.
I think so.
Like he'll just know them.
You'll find out that he's been making up names for people for years.
I would love that.
Hey Jay, are you showing up to these upcoming Read Pop conventions between Chicago and Emerald City? Are you doing any of them?
You know, I just talked to John Timms about it last night. I think we're going to cancel going to them just because December in Chicago doesn't sound like the most hospitable.
Oh, I thought it was because John was receiving death threats for his associations with bisexual Superman.
No, I mean,
which I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah,
yes, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, that is kind of nuts. We should be announcing the original art auction for that tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
We're doing a big fundraising campaign for a few different LGBTQ communities and charities. So we're just waiting on confirmation in writing for those big charities, and we'll have hopefully some cool announcements coming off of that next week. And I think on Monday, Tom Taylor is going on Anderson Cooper to talk about the book and all that fun stuff. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. But
cool.
Yeah, luckily no one's really been dissuaded from the hate mail that has been coming in from those trolls. So it will be interesting to see how it goes next week once the book comes out.
I'm not surprised and yet outraged at learning that. But,
what, the hate mail?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, even on my Instagram, I was getting, these crazy people giving us grief just for donating to the Trevor Project. And
what do they care about what do they care about where you donate money to? Or where you donate to? I
don't know if it was that as much as, the gay aspect to Jonathan Kent being bisexual and not wanting to see that in their feeds. But
I'm sure that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure helping those types of charities to those people seems, like an issue for them.
Yeah. Where's your money going to, Marjorie Taylor Greene? Come on.
But so we'll know about Seattle and Chicago. Well, Seattle, I think we're canceling this week, and Chicago we'll know hopefully by this weekend. Because right now it's just John, and I think Ramon Perez is supposed to go
to Chicago.
So we might just hold off and do everything next year in a bigger fashion when everyone can go. And December is just a hard month to travel, I think, to the West and Midwest especially.
Yeah.
Plus, my bathroom's going to be ready. I don't want to leave this thing.
Tell us about your bidet.
There's just no freaking avoiding this.
He has a bathroom to destroy. Hold on. Don't you understand?
Just so he can get it out of his freaking system. Tell your captivated audience.
He literally wants to get it out of his system.
Yes.
Yeah. Jason, tell your captive audience exactly about your brand new highfalutin bathroom. Go ahead.
Yeah, let humanity know what you're about to do to it.
Oh no! Listen, it's just there's a heated toilet seat. That's all.
Okay. There's more to it than that. You can't just be excited. Go ahead. Keep going. Get it. Literally get it out of your system.
Yeah, it's got a bidet built into it. That's it. It's a bidet heated.
It just can't be those two things. Nobody can be this excited over heated seats and bidet. What else?
Every toilet seat that Jason touches is heated eventually.
How many nozzles in the shower?
Yes, Kelly.
Oh, we got 3 different, shower heads.
Why are we prompting you for this freaking miracle bath, this Shangri-La of a bathroom?
You know what, Jason? It sounds like you're building a car wash.
He is.
It is. And I'm the car that's
just walking through your Jason wash.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. You're all welcome to. I'll send pictures when you come visit. You're going to take a bath.
Oh, see how you backed away from that invitation really quick? You're like, you're all welcome to. Wait a second. No. Nobody gets to be in this thing but me.
Okay, Susan had a question as soon as they told her about your rant about your bidet and heated seats and stuff like that. She wanted to know, does Mo get her own sink?
Yes, she has her own sink.
Well, then Susan will sleep easily. So.
Hey, listen, Mo was the one that found that toilet, so you know.
Like randomly, like it was walking across the street. And...
No, she was in Japan. She's like, "Have you ever been to Japan?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Well, you should check out those guys' toilets. They know how to do it up right."
Right,
So,
and you were like, "Absolutely."
I was like,
"Have you
right.
never had a bidet before?"
Not like this. Not like this one.
Well,
yes.
That's not.
It's in the way that you said that with so much reverence. Not like this.
Yeah. Oh no, like this. Listen, there was one at the showroom when I tested it out. I'm like, all right, I'm sold. I don't need anything else in my life.
Wait a minute. You tested out a bidet at a showroom?
No, it's somebody else's house. Randomly, he broke into the back window.
No, they had a working one.
Not
just like a Home Depot one. Not the Home Depot, like, you know, the same.
Who had a working one, Jason? We want to get it. We want to get this, capture this while you're streaming, so just in case the lawyers come out of the woodwork.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, my phone was ringing. What did you say?
Who had a working one?
Who had a working bidet that you tested?
There's a showroom, but it was like their normal bathroom. Like they have a restroom for the customers.
Uh-huh.
In that working restroom, they had one of those toilets, and then you can heat up the seat, and they had the bidet in there, and they had the little air blowers and stuff, and the nightlight. I said, "This is for me." Yeah, this is what.
Did you have that whole package installed into your new bathroom?
No, it's coming. It's like next week. It's coming in.
Like with the nightlight and the whole bit.
I didn't know you could test drive this stuff.
That's how they get you.
Well, the showroom didn't either until Jason did.
Well, I was politely asked to leave,
right.
Promptly after that.
After being there for 3 days.
Yes, it was good.
Shactered.
All right, gents, that's my 2 hours.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to.
Are we?
Well, I don't want to speak for everybody. I'm going to excuse myself because I've got lunch to prepare.
You got your own bidet to
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go pretend I have a decent bidet.
Yeah. Meaning
Right,
you're gonna go in the backyard, right?
Yeah, that's my quote unquote bidet. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Always a pleasure to hang out with everybody.
Absolutely.
Yep, you too.
Thanks,
You guys
Eric.
have, if you guys haven't checked, if you guys haven't liked this video, please do so now. If you haven't already subscribed to Jason's channel, please do so now. If you guys are interested in getting original art from any of the artists that you guys are watching currently, mine included, please go to essentialsequential.com and you can find us there. What else? Social media for everyone. I'm at. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and at Eric Canete. And then you can visit some of my art on ericcanete.com. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your Saturday and Sunday. See ya. Bye.
Eric, you're so valuable with this.
One of us, Jason, knows how to stream.
Yeah,
and one of us does not. Right. I love you guys.
I would agree with that. All right.
Bye. See ya.
By the way, we are streaming on the Comic Art Fans channel this weekend. So there's a lot of guys that are here. Just wants to thank Bill Cox for that, by the way. If you get a chance, go check out Comic Art Fans. And you go to my page. There's a bunch of art from Cully and Klaus and Eric and a bunch of guys, the Cuberts, that are available for the weekend. And I don't know. What else you guys have to say? Anything before we sign off?
You want to see the commissions you're picking up tomorrow?
Oh yeah, let's check out commissions that Klaus has finished before we can then take some more in the next few weeks.
You're coming in tomorrow, right?
Yep. We're still live, Klaus, so don't give out any.
No. We're listen, if you can talk about your bathroom, I don't think you're
right. Fellas, I got to take off, so I will see you another time.
All right, we'll see you later.
All right. Good hanging out.
Thanks, Cully. We'll see you soon. So here's the Gambit, Jace, right?
Very cool.
Here's a Daredevil head.
Perfect.
Here's a Punisher.
Awesome.
Which is awesome. I agree. Here's Angry Batman.
Amazing. You could use a bidet.
And Carrie Kelly.
Oh, great. All right. So I'm sure all those guys will be happy with those
I think
commissions.
so. And I'll finish up the Mr. Freeze, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, guys. So thanks, Klaus, and thanks everyone else who joined us. We'll probably be back in probably about 2 weeks, I think. So
2 weeks. That's the Saturday after Thanksgiving, I think.
Yep, we'll make a post up on social media. But thanks again for everyone for joining us.
Yeah.